So for the past year, Bobby Lee has been completely blowing up, and his podcast with Andrew Santino, Bad Friends, is now considered one of the top comedy podcasts out there, and they are now selling out bigger venues. Not only that, but Bobby Lee finally did Joe Rogan's podcast, which is very interesting because keep in mind that the last time and only time that Bobby Lee has been on the show was almost 13 years ago. And for a while, a lot of fans and a lot of comedians would question why Bobby Lee hadn't been back on the show, why he didn't have a comedy special, and most recently, why was he still in business and doing the podcast with his ex-girlfriend Kalila after all the chaos that they went through, especially now that he has Bad Friends.
I couldn't be you because...
I couldn't be you either.
I couldn't be you because I would say you're everyone's favorite comic and you've never done a special.
So?
I know, but don't you want to do specials?
No.
Why not?
Why?
By the way, I 100% do not expect you to watch my stand-up special.
No, but I'll tell you the reason why I won't.
Yours. Why don't you have one?
That's the reason why.
Age-old question.
And I'm glad that you guys are still keeping the podcast going.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine. I can't. So how are you working together? And are you living together?
What do you mean how?
Are you still living together?
Yeah.
Well, Bobby, we haven't spoken since.
Since what?
Since your whole thing. Since you're free.
Cause she is the niece. You know what I mean? So we gotta.
Are you a spy? Are
yeah,
you
she's
around?
She's a
I'm not.
You can't get away. But what's wrong with you? You keep inviting her behind enemy lines.
I know, dude. That's
Get her out of here.
I know. I was thinking maybe she shouldn't be here.
But don't think, dude.
I know, but
it took you 15 years to get out of that relationship.
I know.
Yeah, but you know what? He keeps the enemies close.
So he can lose.
You don't know his plan.
She really just is here to judge, right? She's just looking at you and making sure you're sad.
I mean, I didn't think that we would talk about it. So do you have some?
I love it.
I mean, he's almost free.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Now we'll talk about the reasons why Bobby Lee took so long to get on Rogan's podcast and why he doesn't have a comedy special yet. But I wanted to go over something that I think is very interesting and pretty important, and that is that Bobby Lee, as a comedian, he's no stranger to drama and has been in a lot of controversy in the past. For example, he has now been part of two of the biggest fallouts in the LA comedy scene, and most recently, the Bad Friends podcast took down one of Too Lazy to Try's video and gave his channel a strike, which was absolutely disappointing, and it was shocking to find out. Now, the good thing is that they have finally released it. They removed the strike, but naturally, that brings up some questions that I think are important and they need some answers. Now, I was gone for a little bit less than 2 weeks, but after catching up with the whole thing, I noticed that there is still a lot of confusion and speculation about what could have happened. Was it Bobby Lee himself that couldn't take the criticism and wanted the video down? Was it somebody else from the team, or was it potentially a simple mistake? Either way, that made me want to take a closer look at Bad Friends, because even though we have been covering Bobby Lee and Bad Friends for a while now, so we've seen them make mistakes and the way that they handle situations, I always thought that we were extremely nice about it, and it wasn't fake, because at the end of the day, Bad Friends is a decent podcast for what it is. And after watching the video that Too Lazy to Try made, I was shocked to see that not only was he being extremely charitable, but he at some point even complimented the show. So, the video that they took down that they were potentially upset about wasn't even that bad. He didn't say anything bad at all. He was essentially calling out everything that happened, and I agreed with everything that he said.
I don't know if I'll be able to convince David to do another podcast with him again, because they had already rescheduled this episode once because Bobby couldn't make the original date, and then the day they're supposed to record, Bobby showed up almost an hour late. So Santino and Spade were obviously pissed, and they let him hear it. Half the podcast was them just roasting Bobby, which honestly did make for a great episode, and the fans agree, they're not complaining. And also, since Santino was annoyed with him, he actually gave his honest opinion about Bobby continuing to do Tiger Belly with Kalila, and as expected, he's not a fan, and he wants Bobby to just end it already.
And I think we can all agree that striking down Too Lazy to Try's video was probably the worst thing they could have ever done for so many reasons. We won't even get into the whole fair use debate, because in my opinion, it clearly is. And on top of that, there's so many other channels right now that have straight compilations and clips and shorts using Bad Friends content and nothing else, just re-uploading their content, and they get millions and millions of views. But somehow they strike down the only video that had some commentary and light criticism and was getting some traction and getting views. Now, the first time that I listened to that Bad Friends episode with David Spade, when it first was released, to me, what I thought was crazy and what I thought the whole drama was going to be about was Andrew Santino openly saying how he feels about Bobby Lee still doing Tiger Belly. I thought that was going to be what the drama was about. And Too Lazy to Try did call that out, and he mentioned that within like the first 2 minutes of his video, but it wasn't the main focus of the entire video, which again, I thought was the craziest thing ever, because just last year when Bad Friends wasn't as big, Santino was essentially defending Kalila and saying that she was family and how much it was hurting them when, you know, the fans were trolling or hating on her. But something changed apparently. And also keep in mind that Kalila still has a family member working in the Bad Friends podcast, but she wasn't there on that episode, which probably pushed Andrew Santino to be a little bit more honest.
You do it with this one and then the other unnamed podcast that we don't talk about here.
Mm-hmm.
Do you hate it, Andrew?
No. I think it's a total waste of his time, but I think it's fine that he does it.
Finally, a real answer.
It's a remarkable soft white underbelly is what it's called.
Yeah. Can I tell you what happened?
Which,
to
by
me
the way,
this
is
week?
great. If you've never seen soft white underbelly,
Can I tell you what happened to me?
Are you sure you don't want to save it for the other one?
No.
You were sort of married to
Kalila, yeah. You know, I look at
finish it for me. Kalila, yeah. And then how long did that go?
10
Well,
years.
they're still doing the podcast together.
You love that, don't you?
It's an interesting move.
I don't know what you're doing. I have no idea what you're doing, and I don't like it.
Parents fight.
I don't like what you're doing. I don't like it, and I don't. I think this thing what you're doing right now. I made a mistake. It's been like this whole right. Be honest.
Really dying.
Back me up here.
It's good though.
This whole time. No, just back me up for a second. All right. This whole time.
Back me up, asking for you to be on his side before making the valid argument. Go ahead.
So let me say something.
Swords.
This whole podcast, I've been looking over, and you do this.
Ching chong.
You do this thing like.
Yeah, give us his moves. What does he do when he's with you?
He tries to smile, but his eyes are rage. So this is what he goes.
And once again, when I noticed that all the negative comments were towards Bobby Lee and were essentially calling him out for not being able to take criticism and not being able to take that people were making fun of him for being late, I thought it was a little bit odd, but it did make sense that people thought that, because at the end of the day, the video that they took down was mainly talking about Bobby Lee being late and how unprofessional it was. And although there is a chance that that is exactly what happened, based on what I've seen in the past and what I'm about to show you, I don't think that is the case, because Bobby Lee, better than anybody else, knows exactly what happens when somebody goes after a smaller creator and knows that is the most extreme and aggressive move. Not only that, but he has also been on the receiving end of it and knows how it's seen by the public, because the last thing that you want is people thinking that a comedy podcast could be abusing the copyright system, especially when Bobby Lee himself has already addressed and said how he feels about people making clips or commentary videos talking about them, and says that he understands them. Not only that, but keep in mind that Bobby Lee's whole shtick is being the unprofessional, the lazy, and the late comedian. I mean, Bobby Lee legit wakes up a few minutes before they start recording for Tiger Belly, and based on what Kalila and Bobby himself have said in the past, it is extremely hard and difficult to be in a relationship with him. Now, I'm not trying to defend Bobby Lee, and in fact, we have covered whenever we thought he did something shady in the past, like the time that he lied about meeting Kalila when he was broke and then getting exposed, and also his involvement in the whole fall of Carlos Mencia and the fight that he had with Ari Shafir. So because of that, anything is possible, but in this case, I don't see how Too Lazy to Try's video would have made Bobby Lee that mad to cause that much of a reaction.
I've done okay,
but
you're so controversial.
But I'm not controversial. I'm just.
Yes, you are. You're in fights all the time with people.
I love it.
But like all of a sudden,
how does that hurt? Like it just causes more people to watch your.
But I mean, I was concerned when I heard that Brendan Schraub wanted to punch you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that worries me.
Okay.
Does it? It doesn't worry you?
No.
You're right. I don't like controversy. Yeah, I don't. It scares me because I'd rather wake up and not have to be confronted by all these things in life. Do you know what I'm saying? But why do you not? Why does it not bother you?
Because in this day and age, because of TikTok and social media and all these things can be clipped, and they're just interesting, right? It's like
you're late every time we film. You're late every time we film, Bob, without fail.
Every single time.
Yeah, bro.
No,
yes.
You're too early. That's your problem.
So is being on time too early?
No. What you do is you come here like 20 minutes before, so it seems like longer.
What you do is you come 20 minutes before to set up the show to make sure that everything is in order. So then when we shoot, we're ready.
But it's all about perception and time. It's all about, right, Jules?
No, don't.
So if it wasn't Bobby Lee, then who was it? Now, this next part is pure speculation, but it could also be that it was somebody else from the team, maybe somebody like Andrew Santino or somebody else that works with them that didn't want the narrative to be spread, that Andrew Santino is now being mean or has turned on Kalila and is also taking shots at Bobby Lee on his own show, especially with Kalila, because it could actually create some drama, and it wouldn't be the first time that Kalila gets massive hate from the Bad Friends fan base. Keep in mind that just a little bit over a year ago, somebody thought it was a good idea to have Kalila on as a surprise guest on the Bad Friends podcast while she was at the peak of her being hated, being the most hated, up there with like Brendan Schaub. And back then, Bad Friends was seen as a safe place where fans could listen to Bobby Lee without having to see Kalila. And the feedback was not good. Now it's their most disliked episode ever, and the fans were actually pretty upset about the whole situation. Now, back when that happened, it wasn't that bad of an episode, and it was clear to me that they were trying to troll the fans. But what was really shocking to me was the way that they responded to all of the backlash and all of the negative feedback. And instead of admitting that they made a bad call, they got defensive and just took a weird approach to the whole situation.
Welcome back to everyone's favorite podcast, Splitting Up Together, featuring Rudy Jules and the one and only Kalila Koo. Sitting in the hot seat today is Kalila Koo.
You know, my last name is not, that's not how you say it.
Kalila Koo.
It's a racial slur.
Like, look, here's something that we can address on the show. We had Kalila fill in for you.
I want to talk about this.
Everybody who watched it that had something negative to say didn't understand that vibe, because I think what you can communicate it better, but the idea that people are throwing stones at Kalila is wild, because also they'd be like, way to go, Santino. like I had anything to do with it.
And now looking back, I think that's a good example of them not being able to take criticism that well, because that would be like if Andrew Schultz had a similar reaction after he had Logan Paul on the show and got completely destroyed by dislikes. Could you imagine if Andrew Schultz, after having Logan Paul on the podcast, if he went on there on the next episode and started addressing all the hate that they got by basically saying that they're sad, that they're hating on him, that they don't understand what the vibe was about, and that Andrew Schultz had nothing to do with it? I mean, I think he would have gotten completely destroyed. And also keep in mind that episode of Bad Friends with Kalila was released months after they publicly broke up on the Tiger Belly podcast, so everybody was fully aware of all the hate that she was receiving. So I'm pretty sure that Andrew Santino knew exactly where all that hate was coming from. Plus, when they first released that episode, they blacked out Kalila on the thumbnail for the first few hours, which makes me think that they probably thought nobody would click on the thumbnail if they saw her on there, causing that episode to tank. So they hit her for a little bit and then, changed the thumbnail. Now, when it comes to the copyright strike, I don't believe there's been an update, at least not coming from them, like a statement or them addressing it. And it's been almost 2 weeks. And I don't know if Too Lazy to Try has been in communication with them, but I do know that the copyright strike was removed about 5 days ago, which is great. I'm glad that they went back on that decision. However, the timing was pretty interesting because they essentially waited to release that strike and allow the video to be back on his channel until after that episode of Bobby Lee on Joe Rogan was uploaded, which means that Too Lazy had that strike on his channel for over a week, which I think is wild. And by the way, huge props to Too Lazy to Try for the way that he handled the whole situation. I thought it was great. And not only that, but he made a follow-up video, which is really, really good, and I highly recommend you go watch it.
Because I'm promoting I'm doing Rogan. I just did Mark Maron to promote this.
Rogan?
Yeah, I'm doing Rogan next week. So I'm doing everything to promote.
Name drop me.
I will. I will. I will. And it's just like, what a blessing. No, just let me finish this. What a blessing. Over the years, people on the internet were like, why don't you do Rogan? I was like, I don't even know how. And I'm here now, and I just feel so present, and I feel mindful. It's going to be a great one. Anyway, thanks for having me.
You're here.
You too, man.
Yeah, we talked about doing it 1,000 times.
1,000 times.
Yeah, and it never happened. And people thought we had a problem with each other or something.
No, we know. Can we talk about the movie I'm promoting?
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's your movie, Bobby?
Oh, I'm barely in it. And they're making me, you know what I mean? But it's like...
But they're making you do promo and you're barely in it?
Well, I have 4 scenes.
What's it called?
It's called Drugstore June.
What's it about?
It's about a girl, Esther, right? And she...
Now, to be fair, maybe you could argue that somebody made a mistake because of, Bobby Lee having a pretty big week with promoting the movie, doing Joe Rogan and all that stuff. Maybe somebody overreacted and gave the video a strike, but I don't know. Even then, I still find it very hard to believe that somebody would make a mistake that bad because it's pretty serious. It's not just like, whoops, sorry, dude. And once again, I don't know if they're in communication or if they have reached out to Too Lazy to try to explain what happened. I don't know if they even will. And although it's a good thing that for the most part it's resolved and the strike has been removed, I still think it's important to know exactly what happened because it's pretty serious. And the fact that they do have a history of not being able to handle negative criticism that well, I mean, hopefully this wasn't a case of abusing the copyright system. And if this wasn't on Bobby, if this wasn't ran by Bobby and he didn't make the call, then this is kind of a similar situation as the drama between Kalila and Brendan Schaub, where somebody close to Bobby Lee, not Bobby Lee necessarily, made a bad decision, a bad call, and caused a huge, massive backlash for Bobby Lee and the podcast overall. Because back when this happened a few weeks ago, when Too Lazy to Try mentioned that his video got taken down and given a copyright strike, there was a massive amount of comments on the Bad Friends YouTube channels and on the social media calling them out for what they did. Once again, if it was Bobby Lee, the one that made the decision to give the channel the strike, that would be extremely disappointing, and it would only add to the list of comedians that have now changed after seeing massive success. And if he wasn't aware, then he needs to have a conversation with whoever let that happen, because it is a big deal. And that kind of leads us to the next point, and what was the main point, what was the original point of the video, which is that something has definitely changed within the last month or two, because either Bobby Lee randomly woke up and decided he wanted to start working hard, or maybe now there's people around him that are pushing him to do things that he wouldn't normally do. And I wonder if that's even sustainable. For example, back then, Bobby Lee kept saying that he was saving Joe Rogan's podcast until he had a comedy special to promote or something huge that he would want to promote.
And you're getting ready to go to the Joe Rogan Club, Adam told me?
Yeah, we're just doing to promote Esther's movie.
Cool.
And then
you should do his podcast.
I'm gonna wait when I do my special.
Okay. Oh, you're doing a special?
Yeah, I'm gonna promote it on his.
What special?
When I do my
stand-up special. When is that?
Soon.
When?
I don't know.
And where are you filming it?
I don't know yet. I don't have those logistics.
And who is it going to be?
I don't have anyone doing it, but I'm going to do one.
In your mind, you're saying you're going to.
No, I'm like working on it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah,
awesome.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Anyway,
I don't know. I like challenging myself.
Still?
Yeah.
Stop.
You don't?
I don't like it when you challenge yourself.
You don't like challenging yourself?
I need you to relax.
I can't.
Now you have to relax. You're stressing me out. Every time I see you, you stress me out.
Oh, you stress me out.
Last night you stressed me out, dude.
Why did I stress you out?
Because you get 3 shows, and then all of a sudden, I know you have other things to do, and you're always running around and stressing me out because it makes me feel like I'm not doing shit, man.
What's your day? What's your average day look like? What
Nothing. Not like yours.
My day is packed. It starts at like 7 in the morning, 6 in the morning. Take Isla to school, get back, work out, podcast, shoot promos, take conference calls.
I don't do any of that.
Why?
Why? That's why. Why don't you ask yourself that? Why do you do it?
Because I feel like I'm leaving stuff on the table.
Yeah, but you know what? Nothing that you achieve is going to fix you. It doesn't. You know, I mean, you have to work and pay bills and stuff like that, but I think you do extra, and I don't like it.
No.
When Bobby Lee first announced that he was finally doing Joe Rogan's podcast, it was a little bit of a surprise because he didn't have a comedy special or something huge to promote besides that movie that he's part of, but he didn't even look that excited to be promoting it, to be honest. The episode overall was pretty good, but it definitely wasn't an episode worth waiting 13 years for. And keep in mind that Bobby Lee is one of Joe Rogan's oldest comedy colleagues or friends, and with all the juicy knowledge that they have when it comes to the LA comedy scene and all their friends, their comic friends, it could have been a very interesting podcast, but at this point of the show, of the Joe Rogan Experience, it's not what it used to be in terms of, you know, Joe Rogan going into topics that nobody else would talk about in other shows, including, you know, comedy drama. I mean, Joe Rogan is the father of the biggest comedy drama ever. He would also be one of the few people that would actually call out people and have disagreements with them, and it would make for great content. But now they just kind of repeat the same talking points, the same stories, so I can understand how people were not happy with that episode. However, I thought there were some pretty funny moments, like Bobby Lee trying to break the ice and trying to make some jokes, and Joe Rogan, in typical fashion, completely missing all those jokes. And at some point, even Bobby Lee, you could tell that you could tell physically he was completely defeated when Joe Rogan just ignored one of his jokes that was pretty good.
And he fights like Brendan Schaub a little bit.
But all he did is throw him. Brendan Schaub was a good fighter.
I'm kidding.
He knocked out Mirko Krokop.
That was good, though.
Christ. How casual did he get out of the way? Because he knew it wasn't a real rock.
Yeah. It reminds me of remember that guy threw the shoe at Bush?
This is picture perfect. This is picture perfect terrible acting.
Yeah.
Picture perfect terrible choreography. Everything about it is hilarious. Does it end? And I think it's also, you have to take into consideration, other than just corruption, it might also be a budget issue. Merely speculative. Oh, merely speculative. It's safe and effective. Our election is safe and effective.
Yeah. Yeah.
Ages 18 to 34 is nothing to concern yourself with. That's normal.
Yeah. But
it's merely speculative.
Yeah.
Really. Best interest in mind.
Is that a cigar?
These are little baby cigars.
Can I have one?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
You're okay with nicotine cigars?
Yeah, I'm not going to inhale it.
You want a real cigar, a big one? This is what I think, man.
Okay.
I think evil's real. And I think evil exists in many forms, and it exists in callous disregard for loss of life for profit.
Everything that you said, I'm with you, but I'm just saying that, like, it stresses me out.
It should.
Yeah, and I want to walk around a little bit more free, and
Hey, you deserve that.
Yeah.
You're a comedian, man. And the redistribution of wealth was insane.
Yeah.
The redistribution of wealth to big corporations
like
and companies.
Gates profited that.
Oh,
big.
my God. So many people did. Billions of dollars was moved.
Yeah. Well, it just stresses me out. You want to talk about the movie?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, they didn't talk about any wild stuff, and they did talk a lot about politics, but overall, I thought it was a balanced episode, and they did say that they were doing more in the future, so that one was more of an icebreaker. And if that's the case, then I think it's time for us to revisit the real reason why Bobby Lee took so long to go back on Rogan's podcast, and why he wasn't taking advantage of the insane podcast boom that he was part of. Because now it's very clear that his excuse of wanting to wait to promote a comedy special was definitely not true. And back then, a lot of people would argue that Bobby Lee has actually been on the Joe Rogan podcast and that they're cool with each other. And I mean, that's true, but that's ignoring the fact that the first and only time that he was on was more than like 13 years ago. That was way, way before the podcast is what it is now. And also every other friend of Joe Rogan that he has known as long as Bobby Lee has been on the show at least 30 times. That's not an exaggeration. So in my opinion, the real reason why Bobby Lee took so long to go back on the show was that part of him felt extremely guilty for what happened to Carlos Mencia and knew that he couldn't go to Joe Rogan's show without, bringing it up or just pretending that nothing ever happened between them, because every single comedy fan knows about it.
Because when you weren't enjoying life, it bothered me. It bothered me because I love you, and like you're such a nice guy, and you get weirded out by so many different things. And
like what? Like what?
You were just always paranoid that people didn't like you, and you were always weirded out by stuff. Even me and you, like we hadn't seen each other for 6 months. Like, do you still like me? I'm like, I love you. What are you talking about? Give me a hug.
Because we have history.
Yeah, but our history is all beautiful.
It's a beautiful history.
We have history of, we've never been in an argument.
No.
We've never yelled at each other.
No.
We've always had good times.
Yeah.
We've had a lot of laughs.
We have.
Oh my God.
Some great laughs.
Oh my God. Have we had laughs?
Yeah.
Now, the story of Carlos Mencia and Joe Rogan has been told many, many times, and it was actually one of our first big videos in this channel. But Joe Rogan was essentially the first person to ever cancel somebody online successfully, and very successfully, because before Joe Rogan exposed him, Carlos Mencia was one of the biggest names in comedy. I mean, he had the biggest comedy show on TV on Comedy Central after the Chappelle Show. He was doing stadiums, and then when Joe Rogan took him down, he essentially lost everything.
It's cost me a lot. A lot. It's cost me friendships. It's cost me money.
You were in therapy for a
while
over, right?
Status. It's cost me stature. It's cost so much, because not only do some people believe that I steal jokes, they believe the narrative that I was sitting in the back of the room stealing everybody's stuff and just changing it and adding the word Mexican to it and make it mine. I mean, that's not even plausible.
And keep in mind that one of the key parts in taking down Carlos Mencia was a video of Bobby Lee, who was Carlos Mencia's closest friends at the time, essentially admitting that Carlos Mencia would steal his jokes and other people's jokes, and that really nuked Mencia's career. And keep in mind that Carlos Mencia essentially discovered Bobby Lee and gave him a career and helped him out throughout his whole entire comedy career.
Really? Yeah. He discovered me.
Really?
Yeah. Mencia without Mencia, I wouldn't have an agent or anything. I opened for him for 7 years.
It's so funny. I just met him at Ralphie's memorial.
Oh wow!
We had through Cowhead, we had talked. Me and Cow was like, "Oh, he might come to the show," and I was like, "Oh, cool." Like, I don't have any problem with him.
Yeah.
I've never had any beef with him. I mean, obviously, I know the backstory of him, but like, I've never experienced it firsthand.
It's a complex story, but my experiences with Ned of a boss employee, and when I was in 1997, when I didn't have a car. He goes, bro, come over to my house. I have a present for you. He bought me a car. I mean, that's the kind of relationship I had with him.
He also took you home with him to Honduras?
Yeah, he took me to Honduras to visit where his homeland is and his family. Yeah. And I lived in a village for a month. So my ties with him were really deep.
Oh, wow.
And so when that video came out, it was hurtful to me because I feel like I betrayed a friend. Mm-hmm. But what I said, was that true? Yes.
Yeah.
So regardless of how bad and guilty Carlos Mencia was of stealing jokes, that was kind of a bad friend move by Bobby Lee because he was clearly trying to fit in and trying to be cool with Joe Rogan and everybody else. So he straight up told that he knows and he has seen Carlos Mencia steal his own jokes and then didn't notice that he was being recorded. He then wanted that video deleted and of course Joe Rogan didn't do that. And once that video of Bobby Lee saying that he does steal jokes started blowing up, Carlos Mencia saw it and forced Bobby Lee to record another video basically calling out Joe Rogan and saying that the whole thing was a lie, that he doesn't know where he gets all his information from, and essentially saying that he was a liar. And then once that video of Bobby Lee calling out Rogan was uploaded, he started receiving a lot more hate. So then he just told Carlos Mencia that he was removing himself from the situation and couldn't take it anymore, and just essentially stopped talking to everybody. So Bobby Lee basically had to choose between defending Carlos Mencia or co-signing what Rogan was claiming and helping him take down Carlos Mencia for stealing jokes, but he chose to not do anything. And then Bobby Lee also mentioned that the Death Squad or Joe Rogan's friends actually tried going after him for doing that. And once again, not only was Bobby Lee Carlos's opener, but he was essentially a close friend. I mean, they would travel together. Carlos would do a lot of stuff for Bobby Lee. And so the reason why I think Bobby didn't go back to Rogan's, besides that one time a long time ago, was that he probably felt guilty and bad about not defending Carlos Mencia back then and just watching his career die. So then it would be kind of messed up for Bobby Lee to go on Joe Rogan's podcast and benefit from all that exposure, because Rogan's podcast was heavily pushed and built on the controversy between Rogan and Carlos Mencia. And on top of that, Bobby Lee probably didn't want Joe Rogan to talk about something uncomfortable and bring up something from the past. But now that Joe Rogan has a massive new audience, Bobby Lee can go and promote to those new potential fans without having to bring up, all the history and all the past.
He lives here now, right?
Yeah, Duncan lives here.
Everyone's asking me to come.
You should come. I know you were talking about moving to Austin, but listen.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did. I watched the video.
No, I didn't.
Don't lie.
I'm an LA guy are you?
I love LA.
I love LA too. It is everything that I need. Those idiots that moved to Texas, those morons. Some of them are coming back. Tim Dillon, I saw him the other night. He's like, I'm moving back October 1st. It's like, no.
Yeah, I saw that on the Joey Diaz podcast.
Yeah. They're going to come back.
But yeah, there's nothing out there. I mean, it's going to be fun for 3 years.
Yeah, LA's the best.
Yeah, it is.
You could have it has the best food if you know where to go, right? It's got, the beaches.
The best weather.
The best weather.
You don't have to fucking scrape ice off your windshield to go to work in the morning.
Yeah. It's expensive. I get it.
You did.
What I said?
I moved to Austin. I don't leave my neighborhood. I don't go to Compton. I stay right here.
Could I say something?
What?
You know what, man? No, you know what, man? You know what, man?
What?
Listen, you have to understand what you guys did.
What did we do?
You guys took half of the talent out.
Yeah.
So I was just butthurt.
We brought another bunch in too. And how much of in the early days, like how much of what we used to say was just for shock value. Like you would go on a morning radio show. You would try, I know. We would try to say as shocking things as we could because that was the way to get attention. Especially like Opie and Anthony.
I know.
I know. We don't have to talk about it.
I can vaguely go around it. I'm just like, at the time,
we all did it.
Yeah, I was a survivor.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, this is the culture.
Yeah, this is the culture.
And also, I'm like a LA comic. I'm an Opie and Anthony with beasts.
Mm-hmm.
Patrice, Norton, all those guys were f***ing beasts.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then, at the time, and then later, and then now, but it's like.
But now it's a much more honest thing.
Now, the reason why Bobby Lee doesn't have a comedy special yet when everybody else does, I think it's pretty straightforward. And that is that not only is he a different type of comedian than any other Rogan Sphere comic, but he also comes from a different school of comedy. For example, he used to do The Mind of Mencia and Mad TV, where everything had a standard for how it had to be produced and made. And back then, and even now, there are comedians that never want to do a comedy special because they don't want to burn their entire material, their whole act, because believe it or not, they have the same act their entire life. Obviously, the act ends up being hours and hours of material, and they just kind of change it depending on the crowd, but it's all the same thing and it never really changes overall. However, the comics that changed all of that, I believe, were George Carlin and more recently Cat Williams and Louis C.K., who everybody talked about them, how crazy it was that they would do a new special every single year or write a new hour of material every single year, and they would push other comics to do the same thing.
Why don't you have one?
That's the reason why.
Age-old question.
That's the reason why. It's because I'm such a lazy writer, and I hate my material, and on and on and on, that it's just one of those little things that plagues me.
Why don't you retire it on a special?
Yeah, and then you'd have to start over.
I want to admit to something to you right now, if I may. I do. I want to admit something to you right now, if I may.
Okay.
The reason why I haven't done a special is because of the fear of doing new shit.
Yeah, of course. Of course.
It's shameful. I get...
Yeah, but this idea that you have of a Bobby Lee new joke night.
I'm forcing myself to do it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Because, when you guys left the store, and I don't want to make fun of... I love all the comics, dude, but it's like, sometimes when the headliners, like the guys with names, leave town for the weekends, you look some of the lineups there, you know what I mean? And so when they're not as strong. So when I'm in town, I'm in the main room, I have the prime spot, it's packed. I have this pressure to crush.
Of course.
Because I just know that they're there to see me and I want to give them a good show.
Well, you could do sets other places too, Do sets other places. Go to the Ha-Ha, around at the Ice House. Go to Flappers. Go around in other spots.
Flappers?
Yeah. I know you're saying that, but it's like, go up there. It's a crowd. The humans, Burr around there.
Oh, well, yeah.
Burr likes to do that. He likes to go to the Ice House around there.
Yeah.
You got to kind of around. You gotta like come up with ideas and sit down.
And also there is a chance that maybe Bobby Lee just isn't comedy special material, and not in a rude way or a bad way. Not about being funny or not, because it's not like a thing that every single comic needs to have a comedy special or a given that everybody does. I mean, nowadays, the new thing to do is to self-fund your comedy special, but I don't think Bobby Lee would ever do anything like that. And on top of that, Bobby Lee has said a lot of wild things in the past, jokingly, that would probably prevent him from getting a comedy special or doing anything big like that, because keep in mind that at some point Shane Gillis was canceled for something he said on his podcast, literally the day of getting the announcement that he was getting a job at SNL. And Bobby Lee, as soon as he tried signing a deal with, or he actually signed a deal with Wondery, I believe, to get Tiger Belly to be on that platform, right away the whole TJ story blew up, and they shut that whole thing down. And since usually people start digging when new projects come out or big things are announced, it was likely a mental block for Bobby Lee that stopped them from trying to become a bigger thing. And also, I would assume that the same type of guilt that he felt for Carlos Mencia is what would stop him from leaving and stop doing Tiger Belly with Kalila, because it would be pretty messed up if he just left when he just has a way bigger project and doesn't need Tiger Belly anymore. So because of that, I don't see Tiger Belly ending unless Kalila ends it on her end.
Number one, I don't want to do stadiums.
Okay.
I've done them with you guys.
Yeah.
You know,
you
I
don't
think
enjoy it?
No. I like clubs.
Yeah.
You go into a club, you can touch people in the front row. Also, then not less sexually, but like, tap, like, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
And then it's also, then you can sometimes meet them afterwards.
Yeah.
And get some side gash or whatever. And then is that rude?
No.
Call it side gash.
No. Wait, where is the gash?
How much time are you dedicating now to your podcast versus everything else?
What do you mean?
Like, I guess job-wise, like, has the podcast gotten to a point now where it's like, you know, you don't need anything else? Is that the goal?
I do need other things because it's like it doesn't fulfill all my desires. But no, because I have to do stand-up.
Sure.
And I do love acting, you know, but for right now, it's where I make most of my money. If I toured more, I could make more money doing that. But I'm going out with Andrew, you know what I mean? So we just did 26 cities. We did San Diego, you know, different gigs, and it's been incredible. I mean, I used to sell, I could sell out a comedy club, but now it's like we're doing these theaters, and it's so amazing, you know? So, I'm not going to quit podcasting. I love it, but I want to do all the other things as well. But it's like, but it's also at the end of the day, I don't know what's next. Do you?
Now, the conversation about not wanting to do arenas and not caring about money was pretty interesting, because now Bobby Lee is the second comedian besides Louis C.K. to kind of tell Bert Kreischer the same thing, but Bert Kreischer doesn't seem to understand how that's possible. And just based on the conversation that he had with Joe Rogan and then Bert Kreischer, it doesn't really seem like Bobby Lee has changed much in terms of being, money hungry or wanting to get more money and be bigger and all that stuff. Because right now he could go on a massive tour and go the Tom Segura and Andrew Schultz route and do massive theaters and stuff like that and just completely ignore the Bad Friends podcast. But instead he talks about not wanting to do a lot of that and how he prefers doing clubs instead of doing theaters or bigger venues. So I do wonder what the conversations are like for the Bad Friends tour, because I would assume that Andrew Santino, being much younger and the fact that this is probably the biggest thing that he's ever been part of, he likely would want to take advantage of the whole thing, and I don't blame him. He probably wants to, do a whole world tour and do the same thing everybody else is doing, but I don't see Bobby Lee on that same page. It seems like Bobby Lee is just he's just riding the wave and doesn't really care, and it almost feels like if he was pushed to do Joe Rogan by an agent or somebody close to him just to promote the movie and the podcast, because once again, he didn't have a special to promote and he just plugged the movie, and it was for a little bit. It wasn't even that exciting. So again, it could be a situation where everyone around him wants him to be another Bert Kreischer that just says yes to everything and keeps everybody busy. But at least for now, I don't see that happening. I don't see Bobby Lee just turning into a workaholic and just doing what everybody else is doing right now. Keep in mind that he's one of the few comedians that still lives the same way that he used to. He hasn't really changed much, and even though he has been completely blowing up, I mean, just a few episodes ago, he was nearly an hour late to his own podcast with a huge guest.
God, we were having such a lovely conversation. Yeah.
Reminder, nothing, huh? You always do reminders, no?
Mm-hmm.
You don't.
How many reminders? Check your phone.
Jesus Christ, man.
Yeah, it's my fault. Sorry.
Whose fault is it?
My fault.
It's your fault?
Sorry, Bobby.
Wow.
I had no idea.
How could you not? We couldn't stop talking about this.
I forgot.
You scheduled this. I drove here from Ojai at 7 in the morning.
Ohio!
No, Ojai!
That's insane!
Insane. Say hi to David.
Thanks for coming. I'm such a big fan. I'm so sorry. I'll make it up to you. I know I see angry, David.
Dare you, yeah.
Are you furious?
He should be.
No, 32 movies.
Oh,
15.
I've never seen you like this. Listen.
And he has a long track record of not being a great worker and not a responsible person. But at the same time, I think that's what actually makes him a real and an actual comedian. And although I don't really care much for a Bobby Lee comedy special, I mean, I would definitely watch it. I still think that Bobby Lee is a real comedian and not just like a failed actor or somebody that did stand up as a second option. So because of that, it will be very interesting to see how Bobby Lee handles what's coming to him in terms of money and fame and all that stuff. And hopefully they do address the copyright strike situation because again, it's a very important thing. But until then, until we get some sort of response or they address why they did what they did, we can only speculate. But yeah, is Bobby Lee changing? Are the people next to him making him do things that he wouldn't normally do? Will he burn out pretty quick? And is this even sustainable? But yeah, Bobby Lee has always been a pretty strange person and an interesting comedian. But let me know what you think in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe to support the channel. Dislike if you didn't like the video. But that's all we have for today. See ya.